And welcome back to the show. The New York City Housing Authority, better known as NYCHA, is the largest provider of affordable housing in New York City and predominantly serves communities of color and communities with high unemployment rates. NYCHA is struggling to meet the needs of their tenants who face issues of fiscal mismanagement, toxic mold, pest, and vermin infestation, no elevators, heat, as well as no hot water. There's currently a 3-year backlog of repair requests. In July of 2020, NYCHA chairman introduced the blueprint proposal, which modifies the protection included in a tenant's lease. Joining us to share now a little bit more is the president of the Gun Hill Houses Residents Association, Robert Hall, the founder of Ojala Threads, Ramona Ferreyra, and also Reclaim Fellow of the Movement School, Jasmin Sanchez. All of our guests are currently NYCHA tenants, and we welcome you now to the show, and good to have you all.
Thank you.
Let me talk first and foremost, and I'll go ladies first with this issue. When we talk about NYCHA, and particularly now with the winter coming upon us and temperatures actually changing, talk to us about where you see things right now with regards to NYCHA and housing.
So I would say that, what we've been seeing is that NYCHA has abandoned its mission, which is to provide affordable housing that creates upward mobility for working class families, and that creates a housing security for seniors and for those with disabilities that otherwise would not have housing that they can depend on in New York City. Since before the onset of COVID, NYCHA was facing a backlog in its repairs, but because of COVID, all repairs inside homes have stopped completely. And that is really troublesome because winter will worsen our needs for repairs that not only address issues such as leaks and clogs, but also we know that our heat has been troublesome for the last, couple seasons for the winter. We have higher incidences of major, roof leaks like our apartment here at Mitchell Houses. We've had a leak for 7 years. So we just feel that NYCHA really has dropped the ball. And since the arrival of Mr. Russ, the current chair of NYCHA, the focus seems to be on introducing really complex plans such as the blueprint, and not on providing, safe and affordable housing for about 700,000 New Yorkers.
Jasmin, talk to me a little bit about, we hear this thing called the blueprint plan. What exactly is that? From your perspective, how do you break that down?
So the blueprint plan is another name for privatization for public housing. They try to use these fancy slogans to attract folks to want to privatize their units, right? But what happens is when public housing is starting to become privatized, which we've seen with RAD or Next Gen or NYCHA 2.0, once you go into the route of Section 8, you're stripping away the federal rights that each tenant has in public housing. And this is just another stunt of New York City and NYCHA to privatize. We do not want to sell air rights. We do not want our infills being sold. We do not want our residents to move from Section 9 to Section 8 because we know that there is not a security in these Section 8 vouchers. And, they say that, there's no money, but there's only no money for things that matter to everyday people, right? There's always money for war. There's money for tons of other things that are not important and that do not affect everyday working class Americans. So for me, being a NYCHA resident my entire life, hearing the blueprint, it can sound fancy, and some folks might say, we need these dire things fixed in our homes. So they're going to say, we want to go into partnership with this public-private, sector. But what we're saying as public housing residents is that that is never the case. We want to make sure that public housing remains public. It is the only low-income, truly affordable low-income housing stock that we have in New York City, and that it's owned and funded by the federal government. So it is their duty to ensure that we have what we need, our basic rights, our human violations. They're violating our human rights, right? make sure that they're able to give us what they need and provide the funding and resources. This is why public housing was established. It wasn't established to convert into privatization.
Yeah. Robert Hall, president of the Gun Hill Houses Association. I want to bring you in on this conversation as well. Talk to us a little bit, Mr. Hall, about what you're seeing in your neck of the woods, and as we talk about this blueprint plan as well.
Well, when we talk about this blueprint plan, most presidents do not totally understand the plan in its entirety. This has become quite problematic. One of the reasons it's problematic is because the presidents are not educated on the thoughts regarding creativity of a portfolio, and going from Section 9 to Section 8, that's a violation, okay? We live off of the 964 Rules and Regulations, which is our Bible within the confines of New York City Housing Authority. This has become problematic because they no longer want us to go along with the program, but they want us to go down to Section 8 where they can get a more happy dollar. And that dollar is going to excruciate the idea of us being low income in its entirety. So they want to put us on the market and then eventually sell us off. And a lot of presidents are not educated on the fact that this is the floor that NYCHA is creating as we speak right now.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about evictions, and I guess I'll come to Ramona about this, because I guess there is a lot of concern on the part of city residents who live in NYCHA that if this thing continues to go forward, where resident evictions could possibly go, and especially following all that's going on with COVID-19 affecting New York City.
Yeah, so, one of the issues with the blueprint proposal, and, I think it's really important that we focus on this as a proposal that NYCHA is making, and that it has to make to not only tenants, but to elected officials at the state, city, congressional level, and at HUD, right? We are, concerned that there is a lot of vagueness surrounding the rights, as Jasmin mentioned, the Section 8 inclusion. And these things concern us specifically because in the past, what has happened when you bring in private developers and they become the landlords, basically, under lease terms or under the owners of the debt that NYCHA now wishes to take on in exchange for moving us into Section 8. And basically, NYCHA wants to borrow money and say to these banks and these private investors, we can borrow all of this debt from you because federal money can be used to guarantee that this debt is going to be paid. When that is happening and you're including private funding in the way that, public housing and public tax funds are being used, we've seen in the past that evictions have risen. So Jasmin mentioned the RAD program, she mentioned NYCHA 2.0, and these are other reiterations of, I would say, hoop dreams that have been sold to NYCHA tenants, where tenants are told, you're gonna have a new property manager come in and they're gonna repair your apartment and you're gonna get the things that you've been waiting on. What ends up happening is, which is what NYCHA has already stated as, as part of this proposal, is they make your unit basically meet the bare standards for being inhabitable. So they will replace things in your bathroom, they will replace some of your appliances, but the real issue of maintaining public housing and making sure that it's still around in 100 years is never part of that vision. So when these new developers come in, they can remove the 30% rent cap. And we already know that a lot of our neighbors have been told that they no longer qualify for public housing residents based on their income. So NYCHA is already evicting folks that make too much to live in public housing. And when we look at how a community should be inclusive of different income levels, we should have a community where you have, seniors and folks that are disabled, and are below the poverty line, but you also have working professionals and, you know, folks with a higher income, so that that diversity and that mixture creates a reflection of the entire city, right? So we are really afraid that because everything is so undetermined at this point, and NYCHA has never had a trust, which is also a key component of this blueprint proposal. The trust would include folks from the private sector, folks from the public sector, and our working group that meets every Sunday, we were able to demand that tenants be included in that. So it will have some tenants, but that trust at any given point can decide to remove that 30% cap on your rents.
Jasmin, I want to bring you in and talk to me a little bit about the Green New Deal, because obviously a lot of people are talking about that as well. Talk to us about the Green New Deal, what that means to you, and for somebody who may not know about it, how that affects NYCHA residents.
Of course, I love the Green New Deal for public housing. I can speak to it so passionately as a resident. And for those who don't know what that is, really quick, a description is that a Green New Deal for public housing really invests, is the first bill of its kind to not only invest in the infrastructure, the green of a development, but also has an investment in the people that live in public housing. And no bill has ever prioritized its residents, right? And when speaking to people in public housing about why this is an exciting bill and why they should support this bill, some of the things are the things that we've already heard, right? We want our repairs to be fixed, and retrofitting the units without displacement, which is key, is something that this bill can afford to the residents of public housing nationwide, right? The other thing is the fact that we do have private contractors that come into our developments and ask for a contract of an insane amount of money. So this money is being given to private corporations to do the repairs, and we know that they're not getting done, when we should be investing in the residents that live here in two different ways. There's a program called Section 3, which already is part of the HUD program, and it's already supposed to be implemented in public housing, but it is not. It's required right now for 30%. We're pushing for 90%, and that 30% is of residents that live in public housing. They are supposed to secure the jobs, right? But we're seeing that that's not happening. So you didn't give us 30%. We're asking for 90% now, because we want to own our communities. We want to invest in our communities and be active, right? So that's one really great thing about this bill. The other thing too is that we know that there's talent in public housing. There's talent with folks that have licenses, have small businesses in regards to construction, tiling, paint work, window repairs, maintenance, everything. Why are our residents not the first to receive those contracts when we can do the work? And we've known that a community that takes care of themselves will always grow and nurture. And this is something that has never happened. And this bill calls to provide these small business opportunities to residents of public housing. And that is really exciting for some residents to know, because one, we know that the time that it takes for these repairs to be made, but it's also, we're giving now the opportunity to residents to really begin and expand their small businesses and really have that investment, not just in themselves and their families, but also in their communities. The other thing about this bill too is that it offers several grant programs that are outside of FEMA. My development at Baruch Houses, we pronounce it Baruch, but it is Baruch Houses, was affected by Superstorm Sandy, right? And had we had a program like a Green New Deal for public housing in place, we could have asked for grants and received grants outside of FEMA, which we know takes forever. Sandy happened 8 years ago. We had the money right after Sandy. They just started construction last year. So if we would have got hit again, my community would not have been in a great space, right? But they have these grant programs for resiliency so that you can think about, like, this is what happened in 2012. We know that it's going to happen again, because we're not doing much as a nation to reduce fossil fuel, right? So we can almost anticipate that climate change is going to affect us more so because our communities are frontline and they're vulnerable. Let's plan. What is it that we need? Do we need a community center? Do we need generators? Do we need spaces for mutual aid work? Like all of these things to be more resilient. They're already in here, and these grants are separate from any money that we would get from FEMA, which is really, really important to state. And the other thing is that when we're talking about like reimagining what public housing can look like, this is a Green New Deal, right? So it will offer tons of green jobs that are unionized across the nation, but because public housing is a vast amount of property, right, in New York, it will directly affect jobs in our communities. And I think that that's really important to note, but it also transforms all of our appliances into energy efficient appliances. And what NYCHA does is that they get the cheapest thing and they give it to us, and then they have to keep coming back to build more and more when they could have just bought something that was of quality and that will last us longer, right? So we're pushing for these energy efficient energy efficient appliances, so that we can start contributing to this movement of saying we no longer want to contribute to fossil fuel. If we remove all of that from our communities and we turn green, it is like removing 400,000 cars from the streets. And to be part of something that big that is actually contributing to the reduction of emissions and to the reduction of climate change, I think is profound. And why not start it with a housing stock that the federal government already owns? They own public housing nationwide. It is theirs. So start making these programs a pilot so that we can show the nation that this is what going green in America looks like. And I think that's something that they need to focus on.
Let me bring Mr. Hall in and talk about where do you go from here? I mean, obviously you talk about the Green New Deal. I know that's something that you're also in favor of as well. Where do you go from here? And talk to me also about involvement, because in addition to having all the housing presidents, it's also about getting the housing residents behind this as well. How do you go about mobilizing with this situation here?
Well, the idea is a tremendous idea, and knowledge is power. What we have to do is educate ourselves, educate the residents on this process, and show that this process in and of itself is beneficial across the board. The opportunity for people to be able to work, the opportunity for people to have appliances that are much more efficient, all of these categories fall into the Green New Deal and the efficiency aspect. But once again, residents do not fully understand. It is our responsibility as presidents. We have to take this on to educate the direction regarding the future of NYCHA per se. All we ask for is a say, rather than people coming in and telling us what they feel is in our best interest. We need to have a say. We're surrounded by the 964 regulations, which indicate nothing should be able to go forward at this point until NYCHA and the hierarchy of the residents, which is CCOP, our citywide, agree on certain aspects. But once again, we have to educate the residents in the best interest of this growth and reproduction phase. But it's a great idea.
Before we go, I want to get an opportunity for how the public can actually be a part, to help advocate, to help raise their voice, to blend with their voices, to blend with your voices that have been out there so passionately for these issues. How does the public go about it? And also, before we go, what do you have coming up?
So we actually have two opportunities for anybody to get involved. One is every Sunday, the Residents to Preserve Public Housing, they get together at 3 p.m. and we have a Zoom meeting. That information can be found mainly on the Instagram account for Ramona the Mona, RAMONA THEMONA. And we also have someone that's helping us set up our social media. So soon we're gonna have an independent account for that. The second opportunity is that every Monday night, we have folks that get together to help us educate and roll out the outreach platform for the Green New Deal for NYCHA. And that information is also posted on Sunrise NYC. They have a Instagram, they have a Facebook, they have a Twitter, and I also share it on my Instagram. But I would say that in addition to making sure that we have NYCHA resident leaders and NYCHA tenants involved, it is really important that every New Yorker try to support public housing residents as we try to take back control and really, push back on what is happening to public housing, because public housing has become synonymous with so many negative things. When we look at the gun violence that's been happening in the city, it is directly correlated with the fact that public housing no longer provides the resources, the assets, and the support that it did in the past. So if you have an issue with the negative things that are happening in your community and you want to see a shift take place in your community, the one place where you should be putting your energy is into NYCHA, because there is talent within NYCHA, there is economic opportunity, there is a desire to make a difference within NYCHA. And 4 years ago, every time that $1 went into NYCHA, $1.80 came back out. So if everyone that lived in New York City could support us in taking back control and making this, like Jasmin said, an example of what green looks like, and in really redefining in a tenant-led way how public housing should look in the future, we could really turn this around and become an example. But it's going to take people that really want to support a tenant-led effort. And we need help right now with social media, with outreach, with copy, letter writing. The tenants that are involved are really passionate, and we just need folks that can handle simple tasks. You don't have to have some amazing magical skill set. It could be as simple as helping us write some letters and package them to elected officials.
All right. Well, we're gonna have to leave it there, but I want to thank you, all three of you, for coming and sharing. Ramona, Robert, Jasmin, thank you for taking the time and letting us know. Of course, as we go towards the new year, we're going to keep our viewers very much up to speed. I know you guys will be back to update us as we continue to look and monitor the Green New Deal and what NYCHA has going on. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know we are taking a quick break. We will be back with more with the Social Justice Forum. Stay with us. We're coming right back with more show right after this.